Hello and welcome again to This Song Sucks, a podcast where three guys get together and talk about the music that we hate. I'm Josh Kavanaugh.
It's my good friend Josh Kavanaugh on the research machine. And it's my good friend Adam Morrow on the microphone. And it's a freaking me out tonight. Oh, God. And I'm Hayden Crawford and I hate myself.
But you're really good at that, if it makes you feel better.
Guilty as charged.
Well, if you can't tell from that great impersonation from Hayden Crawford, today we are talking about Dave Matthews Band's I Did It. I think we all kind of landed on this one pretty easily because at one point in our lives we were fans of the Dave Matthews Band, and there's, I think, probably some light trauma from this song being released and subjected to it.
I mean, I think it's funny how we picked this one, that it was like, what Dave song should we do? Because one has to be picked, right? And somebody said, I think it was Josh, said I did it. And it's like, oh, that's the funniest one. Just immediately like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to argue otherwise. I mean, there's a plethora of miserable material to pull from, but this is definitely the funniest.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, has the most material from which to mine. But first, we'll get started here with a little just kind of background on the old Dave Matthews Band. So, Dave Matthews himself, he moves to Charlottesville, Virginia in 1986 after graduating high school in his native Johannesburg, South Africa.
I believe it's Johannesburg.
John Hannesburg, South Africa. But a lot of my material comes from a fan biography called Step Into the Light. And according to that, he moved in order to avoid military service because it was obligatory in South Africa at the time.
Yeah, you had to serve.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to call him a draft dodger because being in the military in South Africa at the time probably meant you had to participate in some really messed up stuff.
Apartheid, I believe, is the
yes,
the phrase there.
Exactly. But anyway, Dave escapes that fate, and he begins working in a local bar. And around the end of 1991, he records a 4-song demo of his own songs that he's written. And this is not with any of the members of his band yet. But he was at this bar he was working at. The other members of the band were frequently playing with other bands at the time. And he just kind of went up to him while he was working and say, "Hey, here's this demo. You want to come record a better one with me?" And apparently his intention, actually, again, this biography says this, was never to start a band, but just to have a demo, like a slick-sounding demo, to try to sell the songs.
Do you have a track listing for what was on that 4-song demo?
I don't. I couldn't find anything on it.
Some researcher you are.
So he was trying to be more of a songwriter than a performer? Was that the idea? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so, because at the time he was also sort of active as an amateur actor. That was kind of his first thing he was trying for.
Couldn't you tell from his music videos?
Some would say he is still active as an amateur actor.
But so the 4 guys in the band all eventually agree at different times, but eventually these rehearsals for this demo are just like, oh, this, sounds good as a band. They start playing private gigs at frat parties or whatever, and then eventually you're playing the bar scene in Charlottesville, and that blows up, and they start, touring local colleges. And, they're one of the bands that kind of owe their rise to the liberal audio taping of their...
Fucking snowflakes.
Not liberal as in like a liberal, but like liberal as in they do it a lot. They allowed tape recording of all their shows, and ardent fans would, trade and pass about these live show recordings. And that's kind of how the band first got its first following.
Sounds pretty liberal-y to me, passing around tapes.
Well, I mean, it's Charlottesville, Virginia, UVA. There's probably a lot of hippies smoking weed and doing that liberal stuff, as you would say.
Licking Birkenstocks.
Hayden, do you remember drinking beers on tour at this bar that he's talking about, Miller's?
Yes.
We've been to the scene of the crime. We've been.
Oh, that's the place?
That's the place, man.
I flew into that show that day. That was my first day to join y'all on that tour. I think I came straight off the plane to that bar.
You did. We were sitting there, and it was like in the middle of the afternoon, sitting there drinking PBR. It was great.
I had no fucking idea that was the home of Mr. Matthews.
It was.
He was born right under the bar, wasn't he?
You were so close to greatness and you didn't even know, Hayden.
Wow.
So they independently record in 1993 their first album, and it's mostly live recordings. It's called Remember Two Things. And the material on this album would later end up being basically the basis for their first two major studio albums. A funny tidbit I found was that RCA, their record label, has reissued this album twice.
They put out a vinyl, and it is so expensive. It is just prohibitively expensive, and it's hilarious.
So they first re-released it in 97, and because of that, it ended up reaching, it's a platinum record now, and it reached that status in 2002.
Amazing.
Wait, platinum?
Yeah, it's a platinum
Is
album.
that the only time he got a platinum album?
Oh, buddy, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But when it
Excuse me.
was reissued again, it peaked at 49 on the Billboard Top 200 in 2014.
Incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, like,
Wow.
a full 20 years after they recorded it, it ended up appearing on the Billboard Top 200, which is kind of what I want to go to here. Is their surprising Billboard numbers.
It's crazy.
You know, I think that indicates the fact that something that old and, you know, it's like kind of the lo-fi version of some of those later songs.
Mm-hmm.
The way they built their career, and I think it's why I Did It is so jarring, and why we immediately picked it as people who like enjoyed this band, you know, at one point in our life, and we grew up in a college town. I mean, I feel like this is a band that touched every rung of the ladder on the way up, and then it's had like this spectacular success that just continues to allow them to coast under the radar, but sell out amphitheaters every summer. It's such a weird band.
I think I remember hearing someone saying that they played the Chucker in Tuscaloosa.
They used to play Tuscaloosa all the time.
He used to play Tuscaloosa as a solo artist, I've been told by some of the old cronies. He'd come through with an acoustic guitar very regularly up and down the East Coast.
He apparently used to, when the Sunday alcohol laws were still in place, the Strip would start concerts at midnight on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And the Dave Matthews Band was a frequent, they had a frequent gig there. A lot of Tuscaloosa ties.
Tight.
So
Roll Tide.
Yes, Roll Tide indeed for the Dave Matthews Band. So
A little bye-bye.
God damn it. But around the time in 93, a tidbit I found was that Matthews had incorporated his own publishing company in order to maintain all his rights for the band's music.
He's a clever boy.
And at the time, that was about 30 songs. And I think that's important to kind of keep in your mind as we go forward, because these 30 songs make up the vast majority of the first two albums. The first of which is 1994's Under the Table and Dreaming. It is now a certified 6 times platinum album.
Jeez.
it just flew right past what Hayden said earlier.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And the album peaked at number 11 on the Billboard Top 200.
I do not remember him as a record seller. That's crazy.
Well, here's the thing, is that the records, as we'll get into here in a second, the records are actually mind-numbingly shocking how much he sold. Crash in 1996, 2 years later, is 7 times platinum.
Well, that makes sense, though, because that video was such a sensation. I mean, I can remember, just being tortured by that video constantly.
This is the album, not Crash Into Me. I'm talking about the album Crash, because, again, here in a second, you'll see that his singles performance is not quite as good as his albums.
But what a time to be selling albums, though. I mean, these are like $20 CDs that he's selling.
Right. This is right before the time of Napster and online streaming. So, I mean, yeah, it's
Going straight into my bedroom boombox.
yeah. I mean, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the typical sort of average first week sales of all of his albums have been in the 300,000 to 400,000 range.
Insane.
Yeah.
Big deal. Whatever.
So that album peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Top 200 albums, and the band's only Grammy came from Best Rock Vocal Performance by Duo for So Much to Say, So Much to Say.
Wow, that's it?
Hmm.
What a one to pick it up for.
Yep. So then the next one, Before These Crowded Streets, 98, that is certified 4 times platinum. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200 albums. And it's funny, it knocked the Titanic soundtrack off of that position, which had been there for 16 weeks.
Oh, I hate this country.
I wish we still lived in that country.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's pretty crazy, especially considering how different that album is. But I think just the popularity of the first two albums is probably what drove that to be such a huge debut week for it. Funny thing, Crush, the song Crush from that album, was their first song to enter the Billboard Hot 100.
Crazy.
What an odd song.
And it was number 75. It was the highest it got.
Well, that's a weird song to enter the chart at all, given the length alone.
I mean, Before These Crowded Streets is really their Kid A. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing with these 3 records is a strong the Benz OK Computer Kid A trajectory.
Oh, God.
Is that too bold?
Not bold enough.
So these Billboard numbers were kind of shocking to me because I instantly assumed that, like, Crash Into Me, you heard that all the time. And, like, everyone knew that song, that video was playing on MTV, all that stuff, you know. It never was on the Billboard Hot 100, which just blew me away.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty rapey song. A little rapey!
Oh, my God. This is actually, I discovered a fact that's kind of unrelated to this, but I think one of the reasons that is because apparently prior to December of 98, a song couldn't make it on the Billboard Hot 100 unless it had been released as a single. And single sales and then the radio play of the song are what went together to make a song hit the Billboard Hot 100. So even though all those songs from those first few albums, like What Would You Say, Ants Marching, Crash Into Me, Satellite, they were like in the top 10, top 20 of radio play, but their singles were released like right as the album came out. So they never coincided. So which is why none of those. So like there's a whole bunch of other songs from that era, like No Doubt's Don't Speak.
Oh, yeah.
Was never on the Hot 100.
What?
Yeah. And it's for that reason, because what a lot of record companies apparently did was try to game their single release to coincide with their highest radio play to try to like have a huge smash debut. And that's kind of hard sometimes because it's kind of difficult to tell when it's going to reach that peak.
Also, consider, I mean, did you guys actually buy CD single? And we're in the age of like pretty much nothing but CDs. I remember being, even at a young age with my parents' money, being pissed off at how expensive a single was, like at Sam Goody or something.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even I wasn't falling for that.
I think I had singles on cassette tape. I don't think I ever bought a CD single, though.
I bought 1 or 2. I learned my lesson quickly.
But anyway, moving on with DMB here, a quote from producer Steve Lillywhite talking about Before These Crowded Streets. He said, "I had a great band who were probably at the peak of their personal and musical coherence. However, things started to get a little more ugly after this album."
In oh so many ways.
So that leads us to Everyday in 2001, the album on which I Did It is from, our subject today. It is now a triple platinum album. It again debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 100 albums and stayed there.
Every Day was triple platinum?
Yes. It had 2 Hot 100s with I Did It, which peaked at 71, and The Space Between, which peaked at number 22.
Oh, that song.
Another interesting fact about I Did It, and I'll get more into Everyday a little later on here, but the band intentionally released the song in early 2001 on Napster, and it was the first major label artist to do so.
The self-leak.
Yeah. And
Classic.
It clearly didn't hurt their album sales with, triple platinum status here. So again, just quickly going through here, we got Busted Stuff in 2002 is a double platinum, also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200, and the song Where You Going hit number 39 on the Hot 100.
Where are you going?
You got to think Mr. Deeds probably pushed that one up on the charts.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Yeah, yes, absolutely. 2005, Stand Up, which is single platinum, album also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200.
Fuck me.
And here's the thing. This is the kicker. The song American Baby hit number 16 on the Hot 100, and that is the highest showing of the band on the chart. Is from that song.
What a steaming pile of garbage that song is.
Yeah, I told Lindsay this the other day, and she said, "What song is that?" And I started playing it, and like 30 seconds, and she goes, "Ugh, oh, I hate this song."
It's not even funny to talk about. It's just flat out offensive.
It's always funny how these bands that have like, they're at the height of their powers, the Dave Matthews Band, and I don't know about selling tickets or whatever, but culturally in the late 90s, right? And they don't get their payoff with their biggest single until like so much later. I feel like that always happens. Like the makeup Grammy or the makeup, even like the makeup Oscar or something like that. This always happens.
Yeah, I think there is probably a lot of. I mean, I had stopped listening to the band at that time, and when that record came out, but I remember hearing it on the radio a lot. So there was a lot of concerted effort by whoever was in charge to really try to make it work. But yeah, I mean, my opinion is that is probably their worst album, and I didn't even listen to the 3 latest albums until this past week. So
the Grugrock's King down in New Orleans.
Yep. Also, single platinum released in 2009. Big Whiskey and the Grugrock's King. It also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200 albums, and they had 2 songs hit the Hot 100. He released another one in 2012. That certified gold also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200. And then Come Tomorrow in 2018 is the latest. No certification yet on that on record sales. However, it also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Top 200.
See, Dave was smart. He got in with these people who now have expendable income forever, and they just keep buying his records and coming to his show.
Well, this is nuts, okay? So from Before These Crowded Streets to their most recent album, they had 7 studio albums in a row debut at number 1. They are the first band to do that ever. It blew my mind.
I believe it.
When I read that. As of now, they're actually in 4th place. The only people with more is Eminem with 10, Kanye West with 9, and Taylor Swift with 8.
Wow.
Beyonce and Metallica are next below him with 6.
So Beyonce will tie with Dave whenever she releases her next one would assume.
Yeah, for sure. Again, kind of the reason I wanted to bring all that stuff up was like, I remember you hear all the songs early on, and that's my conception of the band, all those hits. And then, of course, we're all probably deeper into the actual album cuts. But then their record sales, even as they slowly drop off, they're getting more success on the Hot 100 and continuing this streak of debut albums that's just mind-boggling. They're somehow both unpopular and popular at the same time.
It's been their thing the whole time, right? They never existed inside a thing. You know what I mean? You can't really tie them to they're coming out at the same time that grunge does, but they have no scene like that. They're just like working a bar circuit and they get big.
Yeah, critics didn't really know what to make of them. A lot.
Oh boy, did they not.
In the mid 90s, like 94, 96, when those first albums came out, a lot of the music press was comparing them to Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, I remember that.
Ouch.
No shade at Hootie, but
plenty of shade at Hootie. I want to make it clear that I'm throwing shade at Hootie.
You got plenty of shade to throw at Hootie.
Throw away.
So this brings us to the album Every Day, from which I Did It came from. I kind of wanted to give a little background on how this album came about. And as you mentioned before, it's just such a different sounding record than the rest of what came before it.
Yeah, this is the line in the sand, right? And I think that's why a lot of people don't like this song in particular. I mean, the ones before, everything else is an evolution up until this point, and then this seemed very, I don't know if, were they ever accused of like going for a single or like a money grab or something like that? They had to have been. I know the fan base did.
Yeah, I don't remember having that conception, but now after like looking into it more, I kind of agree with that. I mean, so a little background is Before These Crowded Streets, that album, I think only one song on it had been played live. You know, previously I said that the first two albums were mostly all material that had been written in the band's like first year, right? So they go into
Yeah, it had been road tested.
Right.
They had it down.
So they go into the studio for Before These Crowded Streets and just like, we're going to write all the songs and do it in the studio. And I think they tried to repeat that again a second time around. So in early 2000, so this is about a year and a half after that third album comes out, they announced they're going to be recording in a new studio in a basement of a Charlottesville rental house. And then they also announced 2 months later that they'll be beginning a tour in July with the CD being released shortly prior to the beginning of the tour. So like very intentionally put the pressure on them to go from like nothing and in the span of like 5 months have another finished record.
And they've been shitting gold bricks for years at this point.
Yeah.
Why would you not think you could do this?
So in May, they announced that the album release would be delayed until after the tour. Big surprise there. And this biography, you know, says, what was behind the delay? And this is a quote from the biography. Depression, drinking, and creative blockage. Matthews was so frustrated with the writing process that he moved into the studio. So he's just living in the basement of this house, trying to come up with these songs.
It's probably where he practiced all his scatting. Man.
I'm sure there's plenty of that. But according to the drummer, Carter Beauford...
I'm just imagining him in a mirror in the basement alone in like a house robe.
Yeah.
Scatting with a martini in his hand, like practicing scatting in the mirror.
He's like Buffalo Bill with a woman's like bathrobe on.
I'd fuck me.
Oh my God. That is so horrifying imagery. But anyway, according to the drummer, he says Dave was at a breaking point. You could see it. We would be in the studio working on a tune, and then all of a sudden he would get up and not saying anything and just shove his guitar to the side and go outside. So he was clearly having some struggles at this time. So the A&R exec, a guy named Bruce Floor from RCA, apparently would come and check on the album's progress every 2 weeks, and he was not happy with it. He asked to hear the upbeat songs, and so Dave could only reply, there are none.
Oh, man. You mean he wasn't impressed with like a faux metal octave baritone guitar riff?
Well, again, this is before the Everyday Sessions. So
oh, excuse me, my apologies. The Buffalo Bill thing threw me off.
What they're recording here in this basement,
he's still making art at this point.
Yes, it's just him by himself, and apparently the record company is not happy with the tone of the songs. So apparently, after talking to the band and Matthews separately, the A&R guy, says, "Hey, a change is needed." And apparently it was the drummer, Beauford, was the one who first suggested...
You mean his good friend Carter
Beauford? His good friend Carter Beauford on the drums.
Yeah, thank you.
Suggested a change of producer from their longtime producer, Steve Lillywhite. And apparently, from what I read, the recording process for Before These Crowded Streets was kind of stressful because apparently Lillywhite was really like a taskmaster and just made them do multiple takes over and over again, and it was very exhausting for them. So at this point, it's that the A&R guy suggests Glenn Ballard. Ballard was a producer behind Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, but he also produced for No Doubt and Aerosmith. I mean...
And why would you ever work again after Jagged Little Pill? I'd just go to the Bahamas.
Well, for me, his biggest bona fide is that he apprenticed under Quincy Jones while working on Michael Jackson's Thriller. Man. And apparently Ballard worked on the next two albums for Michael Jackson as well. So like this is a big-time hotshot producer, right? So the arrangement is that Matthews, he flies to L.A., and the intention is he's going to clean up these songs from the Charlottesville recording sessions. But he ended up co-writing all the new songs with Ballard in a 10-day period. He wrote 10 songs in 9 days with this guy. And according to Ballard, he said the decision to abandon all the songs was Matthews himself. And Dave said in an interview, "The floodgates opened on this album. This was a therapeutic experience." I mean, I'm thinking 10 songs in 9 days. I mean, cocaine much? Anyone?
He just got in a new environment. It's funny that he went from we're going to do this in a basement in our hometown to like, I should go to Los Angeles and work with this big, slick producer guy. That's just such like a 180.
Right, and most of the information, as I said, is coming from this biography, which is written from a fan's perspective, so it's very positive. And it was also written like not long after the release of Every Day, and so like they make it to sound out like, oh, it was totally the band's decision to do this, but like as we'll see here in a minute, later quotations from these guys, that might not be the case.
We're kind of getting into like, he made a solo record not long after this, right?
Yes, in 2003.
He's kind of doing like a late 80s Tom Petty thing.
Oh, yeah. Except I Did It is no free falling.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No.
You remember how everybody told Petty that free falling was going to be a failure?
Because they were mad that they didn't get to play on it, or they just told him what to play. I appreciate how, sorry for the expression, how petty the rest of that band is still about that record.
I mean, it's almost like they had their hearts broken.
God.
All of these things are true and terrible.
So, essentially, I think what happened with those albums with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers is exactly what happened with Every Day. Matthews and Ballard had written all the songs, and then the rest of the band shows up, and Ballard had charts made for them. So it's like, here's exactly what to play. When previously, I think the band...
I bet Carter Beauford went ape shit.
Well, the quote from the not the autobiography, but the biography said that he felt more professional. I was like, you're one of the greatest drummers in the world, probably. Like, do you really need a chart for anything?
And you have one of the coolest senses of style of any musician ever.
Oh, yeah. That sweet, like, leather beanie on his head all the time.
I keep seeing him in, like, a leopard skin muumuu, even though that's not what he wore. That's just, like, all I can see.
So, an interview I found, it's from 2009 Entertainment Weekly, and it's about the release of their album that came out that year. Matthews said that apparently the band was losing its way and was almost breaking up after the death of their saxophonist. And so here's a quote. He says, "We hadn't put out an album for a while, and the album that we did put out, which is 2005 Stand Up, wasn't us. I feel like it should have said Dave Matthews Band featuring Mark Batson. There's some great songs on Every Day, too, but I think that should have said Dave Matthews Band featuring Glenn Ballard." So clearly they weren't as on board with it as it may have seemed initially. So I found some contemporary reviews of the album.
Oh, let's get into the reviews, yes.
Which it was released in February 2001 and received mixed reviews. And here's some highlights that I found, some quick little quotations here. Rolling Stone, from Rolling Stone magazine. "The opening riff is a crusty stutter of a guitar that Creed would kill to copyright. And the lyric hook in the chorus is just 3 tight syllables. I did it. Jackhammered into your skull." From the Philadelphia Inquirer. "For all its insistent tempos and lack of noodling, Every Day isn't the slightest bit riveting."
It's a lot of like street construction metaphors going on here.
Yeah. From Nancy's.org, which is a fan website. "Basically, it sucks. No, it doesn't suck in relation to most of the recordings on the Billboard 200. It doesn't honestly even really suck. But in relation to what the Dave Matthews Band is capable of, or even what they've recorded previously, it's dreadful." And my favorite, The Onion, the satirical website, dubbed the album brand flavored.
I saw that and passed over that. I'm glad you picked that one up. That's good.
Oh, man.
You missed one part of that Rolling Stone. So you stole my Creed thunder with the Rolling Stone review, because obviously I gravitated straight towards that. But you missed one
I thought
pretty
we had
great...
a Hayden Creed rule. I thought Hayden got to talk about Creed. I thought that was the rule.
Sorry. Stepped over the line on that one.
You sure did. But there was a line you missed that I liked a lot in that review, kind of after the Creed line that says, "Every Day is no fat monster pop that will have all the pickled jocks barking along like the Molson Tabernacle Choir."
God.
Which is like, man, that is just pretty brutal.
Pickled Jocks?
Pickled Jocks is also a pretty good term.
Could that be our new band name?
I'm not in the band with you.
Ow.
You're a fucking nerd.
Ouch.
Got him.
I just assumed that we were always in a band, even if that band didn't exist, but I guess not.
Speaking to the mediocreness of everyday, I've got a pretty good paragraph here from Slant, which gave the record 2 out of 5 stars. And actually, it's actually just the opening paragraph of the review is the most brutal. A friend of mine once claimed that Dave Matthews and his band were the ultimate symbols of mediocrity. DMB had just released Before These Crowded Streets, the dramatic and ambitious and vastly underrated follow-up to their hugely successful Crash. And though I disagreed with my friend at the time, her comment now seems strangely prophetic. DMB's new album Every Day is about as mediocre and unchallenging as you can get. Which is, not as pretty as the Rolling Stone verbiage, but man, that stings.
I mean, unchallenging is a verb that it just hits different when you're talking about using it to criticize music, because it just means that it's not meant to be actively listened to in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And this is already a band that's specializing in good time music, right? I mean, they're like kind of the kings of that. You want to hang?
Carpe diem, bro.
It's the 90s. Yeah. So
Carpe diem,
to be
bro.
called unchallenging, man, that's rough.
You're going to the Dave show to like kick a hacky sack around while they jam on two-step for 20 minutes,
They don't even jam. Okay, never mind. I got stuff about that later.
So
I also sorry,
if you have
my apologies.
If you have more to say about Every Day, please continue.
I do. I dug through as I am one to do the Metacritic user reviews for Every Day to see what some of the brilliant people had to say about it. All right, Jeffrey D has this to say about Every Day. 1 out of 10. Terrible. So uninspired it makes me ill. Matthews has obviously been doing too much crack because his brain has obviously melted into goo. He hasn't made a halfway decent record since Crash, and his latest is by far his worst. It's just disgusting.
I like his brain turning into goo.
People used to get so much angrier about music.
They sure did.
Oh, jeez.
It's not crack, it's heroin, Jeffrey. Get it right. Ian has to say, 1 out of 10. If I wanted this kind of over-romanticized nonsense and textural pretension, I'd buy a fucking Sting album. Now, where did I put that receipt?
What is textural pretension? What does that mean?
Desert Rose, I think.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to throw in one positive one, though. Sarah J. says, 10 out of 10. I loved David Matthews' band, They're the Shit, THERE.
I wanted to ask if there were any supremely negative reviews written by females. If there was any non-dude.
Not that I could find.
Well, this is user reviews, right?
Is it? I don't know. Hayden?
I don't know.
Just some random schmo. Did you make these all up yourself?
No.
He wrote all of these.
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. So moving on to specific things now, 30 minutes in or so, we're actually talking about the song I Did It. I have a couple of specific things and then something more general, but the specific thing is, the guitar riff it's dumb. I mean, there's things, it's on the baritone. As Hayden, you mentioned previously before we were recording that, he gets down to that low register. It sounds pretty cool. But the thing I had forgotten about it was there's that second guitar in the verse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a jangly over and over again, and it just repeats exactly the same each time. And I had to stop listening to it after a while because that was so grating. It was completely pointless. It added nothing, and it was annoying.
Mm.
But in general, my problem with the song is the arrangement of it. There's nothing necessarily bad about any of the sections of the song, but it's very clearly like a Frankenstein's monster, where you have sections that I think were probably written by Dave Matthews, and then sections that were probably written by the producer I'm guessing that Ballard probably wrote the chorus and the post-chorus, and Matthews probably wrote the main riff, and then that little, the little instrumental bridge it's played once and then it ends the song.
Mm-hmm.
That that kind of thing, the classic Dave thing.
Yeah, I mean that's very much a Dave Matthews sounding thing.
You mean Dave didn't write the Boyd rap?
Who knows who wrote that, Jim? But I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with having like disparate sounding sections in an arrangement of a song, as long as you connect them together in some way. Whereas going from like the pre-chorus to the chorus, there's a post-chorus. There's nothing there that actually relates one section of the song to the other. And so it's just this jarring change that sounds not completely thought out. It's like you need to have things that connect together. Like the piano only appears in that post-chorus section and nowhere else. And it's just like two little notes alternating. The violin you only hear on that little instrumental interlude and nowhere else. It just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, maybe y'all could help me with this analogy, but because y'all are more literary people. But, to me, arranging is like taking the guts of a song. It's like similar to having an outline of a story and then fleshing it out into an actual like novel or short story or something, where the song itself, the guts, the sections are just the outline, and then arranging it is what makes it a like consumable, digestible product.
I feel like one of the flaws of this song that leads to that is like just a fundamental misunderstanding of what people liked about their band. Like because there's moments in it where, we joked off mic in our group text that we will inevitably start listening to some of the older stuff and be like, oh yeah, I remember why I like this, and like have a good time listening to it while doing the dishes or something like that. And there are moments in this song where I'm like, oh yeah, I totally remember why I may have liked this band at one point in time. But then, like you're saying, it's just so jarring when it goes to those different parts. And it was almost like a mini Dylan Goes Electric when he's playing the baritone instead of the usual acoustic. There's no violin sounds, really. There's no horn sounds, really.
Mm-hmm.
So you're dumping like all your trademark stuff and trying to make I don't know. I wonder what the reference tracks would have been if they did it that way. Like, what were they aspiring to do? Because it does feel very kind of like you said, Frankenstein together.
I thought about the Dylan Goes Electric thing, and I think my understanding of that is a lot of the furor over that was manufactured. So going back and listening to this, I'm thinking maybe it was a similar thing back when it first came out. Like, we didn't like this because we were upset. Oh, he goes electric. That's not cool, man. And maybe that was why we were critical of it at the time. But no, going back and listening to it now, it's just bad. It's not. There's nothing to like about it.
Sure, but like that Rolling Stone review immediately saying Creed. Say what you will about Dave up until that point, he was a definitely outside of what was happening in terms of all that like butt rock stuff that was kind of coming out
Butt
at
rock?
the time. And so to hear him when he had been like kind of like more folky's not the right word, it's not jam bandy, it's not really world music, but to then suddenly go into the electric is just like, and to play like that, I don't know.
I would argue, like, to me, like to build off your point, like one of my main problems with it is it kind of ties into exactly what you said, is that it seems like a giant waste of talent, that entire track. I mean, say what you want to about Dave Matthews Band, but they are a talented group of musicians, and that track showcases almost none of that.
Yeah, I went and watched a live version of this, and I thought, these guys are so good. Like, even though I don't necessarily like what they're playing, just when they came in on that intro groove, and I watched from, like, around the time that it came out all the way until one from 2015, right before we started recording, and it's like, these guys, they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. This is a good band.
Yeah, I actually saw them live 3 times, 2001, 2, and 3, and they played this song all 3 times, which is a bit of a disappointment. But they put energy into it, like they actually enjoyed playing it. So maybe they don't hate it as much as we do.
They don't seem to.
Did they do the Boyd rap live?
Yes, that was actually
They did in the videos I've seen.
Yeah, that was actually probably the worst translation from studio to live because it's flat in the recording. It just makes you want to fall asleep.
It's heavily layered in the recording too. I can't imagine it sounding correct live.
It does not sound good.
Yeah, definitely not. So do y'all have anything else to say about the song or the video even?
The video it's still tough for me to hate on just the strangeness of Dave Matthews. He seems like he's having such a good time. The video's weird, but I mean, he's having a blast. Just let him have fun.
I mean, to me, the only thing I want to say about the video is that it starts out with him inside of a dumpster, which, no irony there, I guess, at all.
He quickly rockets out of the dumpster, though.
Yeah, but I mean, to be honest, he probably should have just stayed there.
It's so weird looking at this. Speaking about the album as a whole, I did it as the first single. They released singles from this for almost an entire calendar year.
That was actually kind of, I don't know if it was just them or it was something similar, but like an example I found was like, so Satellite was their last single from their 1994 album. It peaked on the airplay chart in 1997.
Yeah.
Almost a year after Crash had come out. So it was kind of the trend I found was that their big singles were the most popular and got the most airplay 6 months to a year after the album had come out or the single was released.
Right. And that's a pretty classic method for trying to blockbuster every single, instead of just like one every few weeks, because the album release was an event and people still listen to the radio. So, now you can't imagine reaching anybody new. If your record comes out in February, you're not going to put a single out in November, because like the people who give a shit have already heard it.
Yeah.
You're not getting anybody new via the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that Every Day was the last single. And that's like, when I think of this record, both because of the name and it sounds the most like them.
Well, it was the only song that had been written before, or actually, it was the only song the band had played and written before Every Day. I think it was one of the numbered songs previously.
Yeah, classic.
Classic numbered song. That's the one that's got the really crazy bridge, right? Every Day. It's got a really odd bridge in it.
Yeah.
Sure.
All you need is, all you want is. Yeah.
La.
Well, on that note, I think we've said all we can. There's so much to say about I Did It.
There's too much.
Yeah, there's too much. I mean, what would you say to it?
Don't drink the water.
Complete non sequitur there.
There's poop in the water.
But I think we'd be remiss. One of the sort of paradox of Dave Matthews, as we kind of alluded to, is the somehow being both immensely popular and immensely unpopular simultaneously. It's sort of it's like a singularity of music criticism and consumption. But according to a lot of what I read, I'm going to let Hayden take a role in this, is that a lot of the biggest problems people have seem to be with the fans. And Hayden, I think you dug up some internet gold for this, correct?
Yeah, there's plenty of source material here. Basically, I dug through a lot of message boards and different articles about why people hate Dave Matthews Band fans, but I won't bore you with that part. I got the hits here. Let's start off with a simple one. Because his fans all have short hair college hats and are probably Republicans.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, yeah. I like that one. This next one's a point I hinted at earlier that I hadn't really thought about, but it's totally true. It's like, Dave is a jam band act with no jams. He calls it music for people whose favorite book is the Da Vinci Code, for whose favorite TV show is 2.5 Men. That's pretty spot on.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And we've also got, mainly because it's horrible pop music for cargo short wearing frat douche dickheads.
Good alliterations.
Yeah, I know. These are talented individuals. Maybe my favorite thing that I found though is took some real deep diving for me, but I was I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I was diving through the Phish.net forums and found people talking about Dave Matthews on the Phish message boards. And this one individual has a pretty good one here. I don't actively hate on Dave Matthews, but I can't stand listening to him sing. It sounds like someone is raping a cat. So basically, people just, they can't stand his voice and they can't stand the fans. That seems to be what everything has to say about it. And it kind of makes sense to me. It's basically all flip-flops, wallabies, and Costa Del Mar croquis, which kind of sounds like the title of my post-adolescent memoir, if I'm being honest. But
well, it seems like they fall in between, like, you're talking about a Phish message board talking about them, and you're in an era where the Dead had just recently stopped touring, and there's like a vacuum, but this is the safest way to approach that world. So, like,
right.
The people that are actually in that world make fun of you, and the people who are still not dipping the toe in the water get to make fun of you. It's just like, it's not good.
They were all pissed too because they've actually opened a show for the Grateful Dead in '95.
My conception of like the super big Dave Matthews fans is they're like, they want to be into the jam bands scene, but they're like too terrified to be around the patchouli smelling armpit haired girl who's like got a hula hoop.
No looks.
It's funny, I went digging through the YouTube comments too, and it kind of like just like proves all of these theories correct when you see the people who were like commenting on a Dave Matthews video if I did it and how they're behaving. It kind of, brings it all back home. So I got a couple I want to throw in here real quick before we run out of time.
Please.
But our first individual, way deep in the I did it comments, says, "Fucking Carter, bro. Bring me back into the real world. Favorite band, DMB for over 20 years. I mean, I can smell the salt life on this guy from here." We've got one. Okay, this is a really bizarre occurrence to me too. This one individual, "I did it. I told you I would. I gave my notice at T&H, going on to bigger and better pastures." I think, do these people know each other? Are they like talking about their jobs to each other on here? Did they meet at a Jeep Wrangler convention? How did this happen?
They met on antsmarching.org, man.
Oh, I bet you there is a bunch of crossover between Dave Matthews fans and the people who like to go take their Jeeps out to like big rocks and drive their wheel up on it and then take a picture of it.
Oh, they've all got the Dancing Nancy's on their sticker on their window for sure.
Hayden, did you see the YouTube comment from Chili P 9 months ago?
No, but I love the name already.
Chili P says, "That is the most hideous guitar part I've ever heard."
Oh, and I know we're running out of time, but I want to leave it with a really good one-liner here that I found. My feet just grew Birkenstocks just listening to this shit.
Oh, well, I guess that's a good way to wrap it up. Again, boys, as usual, thanks for joining us. I guess we're just going to move on to tread some trodden trails. Talk to you guys later. This Song Sucks is brought to you by The Alabama Take. Follow us on Instagram at ThisSongSucksPod and on Twitter at SucksPod. You can also find us on the Alabama Take Facebook page. Comments, hate mail, and song suggestions for future shows can be sent to ThisSongSucksPod@gmail.com.